Shut up and sit down.
Hello and welcome to This is Ibrox, the interviews. My name's Thomas McIntyre and I am absolutely delighted to be joined by treble winner, scorer of that goal against Parma and Australian international, Tony Vidmar. Tony, thank you so much for joining me.
Good. I think it's good afternoon for you, Thomas. Good evening from where I am.
Well, they all sort of merge together at the moment, to be honest with you. I'm sensing it's a lot nicer where you are than it is where I am. But yeah, so I suppose I might as well jump in with the first question there. How's the pandemic treating you?
Yeah, it hasn't been too bad here in Australia or where I'm in Adelaide. It's the last 14 days. I think there's like 10 days where there hasn't been any people contracting coronavirus. So it's eased off. So restrictions are becoming less and less. I think this week they are allowing restaurants to open, but I think with restrictions on outdoor eating with distances. But hasn't been too bad. As I said earlier, golf courses here in Adelaide have been open. The only issue we had probably about 3 weeks ago was no toilet paper. It was.
A video interview. I'm really glad that's changed, to be honest with you, Tony. We seem to have got over that.
It was unbelievable. I think people just lost the plot and bought excessive toilet paper and hand sanitizer. So they were struggling to come in. So luckily now it's all back to normal.
I'm delighted to hear that. Do you know, it was the same here in Scotland as well. I think there was a black market for Andrex and other toilet papers. You buy it on street corners at midnight. It's just an absolute nightmare. But thankfully, yeah, as you say, people seem to calm down now. They understand that there'll always be toilet paper, and in the worst case scenario, there's always kitchen paper. But let's gloss over that really quickly. So, just starting to look back through your career, I'm really interested. You break through, I think, Adelaide, 1989, there aroundabouts, and I'm wondering, when you're breaking through at that time as a young Australian player, was the focus always I want to get to Europe, or was it just I'm delighted to be playing professionally, I want to win trophies at Adelaide? How far did you see yourself going at that point?
I think then I was at Adelaide. I went there 1987, so I left my junior club. So 87 was a kind of a new kid on the block, and fortunately at that stage the coach was looking for local players and wanted to give young players an opportunity. So I was fortunate to be involved training with the first team for a little bit, not playing in the reserve competition, but the year after I kind of started to get a little bit closer to first team action, and then my main focus was just to try to break into that first team. Never ever thought of playing for my country, or let alone looking to go overseas and make a career of it. So it was just happy to be there. It was a club that you kind of grew up watching as the time went on, and then being a part of it was for me was a thrill and an excitement.
Yeah, so I'm thinking then you work through Adelaide, you get yourself as an established player, like you said, you've come across in the kind of localised junior teams. Then you get into the Australian team or the unders as well. You go to the Olympics in '92, I think that's Barcelona.
Yep.
I seem to recall the Freddie Mercury soundtrack to that Olympics. And I'm just wondering, it's the semi-finals off the top of my head, I think you guys get through to. What's it like as a young player going into Europe, representing your national team? And it's a massive difference from club football. I'm wondering,
Yep.
in terms of preparing yourself for that, what was that like for you?
Look, that whole, so that 92, even 91, I broke into the senior national team as a 21-year-old. So, and again, I'd only been playing, I'd play probably 50 games for my club. So was kind of a bolt out of the blue that I was selected in the national team. And so I had a fairly busy year with that, with the 91, with the national team, and then also joining that with the Olympic team. We went to the Olympics and no one really gave us a chance. No one thought that we could actually get out of a group. It was a very talented group. We kind of knew what we wanted to achieve, and we had that bit of larrikin about us. 20, 21-year-old boys. Going to being in a village, and I think we probably just enjoyed ourselves more than probably some of the other Australian athletes, the swimmers. Especially they're so focused in their competition. They look for 4 years for their event. We looked at it as a fun time, and we probably shocked a lot of people through that phase. After the first game, we're probably already looking at we're going to get knocked out because we lost to Ghana, drew to Mexico, and then we had to beat Denmark, which we did. And then from there, just kind of like flew on. And even at that stage, I was probably had one eye on heading to Europe at that stage, because by then I'd think that I'd done everything I could in Adelaide and was looking for that next challenge in my football career.
Do you think, some of those players within that younger squad, so to speak, that you touch on, would go on like yourself to become mainstays of the Australian team for the next 10 years in there somewhere? Wondering, was there a feeling that Australian football at that period, just in that early 90s, was a bit of a, and maybe you mentioned this with the other athletes, was a bit of the stepchild in terms of Australian sport? Did it still have to really make its big?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, definitely. We were looked at, well, because that was the first time also it was an under-23 competition. So people looked at us as a junior team and didn't really take us too serious. We didn't take ourselves serious, but we went up. When we had to work, we worked. When we off the field, we had fun. We enjoyed ourselves. And during that, and probably through that early 90s, that was probably when Australian players were starting to make a bit of an inroad in Europe. You had Frank Farina in Belgium, David Mitchell, who was in Europe, Eddie Krenčević. So there were three names that started to, being pioneers of Australian football to head to Europe. And I think once that three started, then there was myself, there was Paul Iacon, there was Ned Zelic, Mark Bosnich was already there. So all of a sudden, Australian players became popular because they're also cheap as well at that stage. And then it started to build. And I think one thing that football teams in Europe liked us was our mentality. We had a winning mentality. We didn't stop until the very end. And I think that helped a lot of players. Plus, I think we had that ability where we had some decent players who could play. And it was probably the start of the generation. The talk here, they continue to talk about that early 90s, late 90s as a golden generation of Australian footballers.
Well, obviously, if you source any other bargains in your Australia role, which we'll touch on later at the moment, please feel free to give Rangers a call. We love a bargain. so get on the blow, Tony, right? So
yeah.
That. But I'm wondering, it's really interesting you're saying there about the mentality and thinking you'd maybe done everything you could at Adelaide and the players working hard, but also becoming more fashionable in terms of European football and being picked up. Were you being looked at within the squad and being asked questions, or where was your head at? Because you'd cycled through Beerschot at that point as well in terms of your loan. And I'm just wondering, that didn't quite work out. I know you've spoken about this before. I wonder if that changed your mentality about what it was like going away with the national team versus what it was like, which is the group mentality, you're all there, versus going away alone and striking out into Europe. Did that fire you up to get back into Europe and maybe had more success this time?
Yeah. It was, look, it was, as I said, I was called up to the national team 91. We went on a few tours during that 91, 92 as well. We had some Olympic tours before we went to the Olympics. So for that 18 months, I was actually away from home for a fair bit. Went to the Olympics, done my deal probably towards the end of the Olympics. Kind of knew that I was heading to Germinal Aircraft, it was back then. So I was thinking, okay, this is what I want to do. This is what the expectation of European football was massive. It was an unknown for me. Went there and kind of was disappointed. It wasn't what I expected. And I think as that 6 months went on, I probably kind of lost my interest there, and felt that at the winter break, came back to Adelaide, and kind of like I probably missed maybe a few years of my life back home, which I wanted to make up or catch up. So my head was probably not in the right space to go back to Belgium to continue on. And and myself and the club we came to an agreement that I could return back to my club in Adelaide. So it wasn't it was a different experience. It was probably something that I needed, because 2 years everything was going well for me. I had that setback. I probably didn't know how to deal with that setback properly. And then when I came back, then I think it gave me that realization that as the season went on with Adelaide, that I need to do things differently. And you learn from those experiences, and hopefully those experiences take you on further to especially in football, it's not easy.
Well, exactly. I think there's always crossroads moments. It certainly sounds like that was one of yours. I think I'm always interested as well that, particularly, I think this was probably before we can touch on this with NAC Breda as well, before the real formation behind the scenes with a lot of clubs of having that infrastructure whereby a foreign player comes in and there's a whole team that settles you into the country and makes sure you're set up with an apartment and things to do and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. That's a big thing, especially, and I was young, I was single. So, the club didn't have to worry about, making sure my wife was happy and things like that. But it was a similar thing, had to work hard to find an apartment, found it, they kind of dumped you in there, and then it was like you're left on your own. And, you go into a foreign country, you don't know how things work and how the rules are, so you're kind of on your own. You don't mind that for a while, but then it gets to a point where you think something doesn't add up right. Something doesn't feel right, and that's probably what happened with me. I just had that gut feeling that it wasn't the place for me to be.
Yeah, so you get yourself out, you go back to Adelaide, and then we'll quickly cycle through that, because you end up going to NAC Breda, NSA Breda, and I've been working on my Dutch pronunciation there, obviously, to get that nailed down.
Done very well.
Oh, thank you very much. I'll make sure I never say it again. Again, you offend anybody in Holland.
Yeah.
But you get there, and that's a big move in terms of Dutch league's always one that's, people can speak about the quality of it sometimes, but it's always one that's looked at. And again, you're going into that permanent move. It's a big transition from Australia. You've come out of the back of what we've just spoken there about maybe being a different Tony Vidmar now in terms of understanding what you want. I'm just wondering, was that the only club that was looking at you in Europe at that point, or why Breda?
Well, at that stage I was wanting to head back to Europe, and at that stage was Graham Arnold, the current national team coach. He was on loan there from, I think he was at Charleroi, so he was on loan to NAC Breda, and he was a success there, scored a lot of goals, and they liked him, so they were searching for a left back, and they actually spoke to him. Do you know any Australian left backs? At that stage, I was still with the national team, so knew Graham well, and he said, "Well, I know someone." And the club knew, so he mentioned mentioned my name to him. So the club knew that I was in Belgium a few years ago, and Graham said, "Look, you know how it is, Belgium, Holland's a different mentality. I don't think you'd have any issues here." So he called me, and Graham, that was the first thing he said. He goes, "Belgium and Holland, different mentality, different outlook in football back then, how it was." He said, "You enjoy it. I think this is the right club for you." So that was the opening that I wanted, and was the right moment for me to head back. Learned from the years before, and I've felt, well, I've already got that package already in my suitcase ready. So if anything does happen like that, then I'm prepared for it. So and that were the only club at that stage. There was some interest from some clubs in England, but nothing really definite. But this was the one that was 100%.
So you get yourself into Holland. You obviously make a success of it, and then you get to the end of your contract, or coming towards the end of your contract, I should say.
Yep.
Football's went through that really turbulent period and trying to understand what Bosman meant.
Yes.
For players as well. And then your agent mentions that Rangers might be interested, and I imagine again that there was other clubs looking at you. I'm just wondering from the outside, how aware of Rangers and the size of the club were you at that point? I probably appreciate Old Firm games, etc., would have been on TV in Holland. But had you spoken to anybody else, or take me into that conversation when Rangers first come?
Yeah, that's a good one, because back then, mid-90s, we didn't really have the internet, and so it's not one where you could actually Google or whatever to find out about the club. You knew of the name, and again, you knew the Old Firm games, and that was probably the much that you heard, and people, even the Scottish people in Holland who Rangers or Celtic, so that was a big thing. And at that stage, that was I think it was just after the winter break, so it was probably early February was our first game back, and my agent said, "Look, Rangers is coming to watch you. There's some other clubs interested in Holland and in England." So I said, "Well, we'll just see what happens." So they came to watch the game, and as you said, and I said to my agent said to me, he goes, "Do you want me to tell you that if a club is coming or not?" And I said, "Yeah, I want to know. I want to know that the club is coming, so then I'm prepared for it." And yeah, had the game. I think it was away to Sparta Rotterdam, and I think it was Walter Smith who came to watch the game. And at that stage, the club wanted me to stay on, but we never really sat down to discuss anything in contract. And after the game, I think it was a Sunday night, got the phone call from my agent. He says, "We're flying to Glasgow on Tuesday morning." So it was, for me, that was the impressive part, that the club knew what they wanted, didn't really dilly-dally about it, just went, if they wanted a player, they went and got him. And for me, that was enough. As I said, there was other clubs who showed interest, who we spoke to, but nothing really confirmed of what it is. So I flew into Glasgow, not even knowing what the contract was, and my agent, who's told me a bit about Scottish football and also about Glasgow Rangers. So for me, it was okay. This is a big step, and I knew that it was a big step.
Yeah, I mean, for any of the younger listeners, it's probably important to mention our ages here, Tony, because they just will not get that at all. Yeah. Type keys, not touch screens. So yeah, I think there was that feeling about Rangers at that point in time, and certainly it's come back after our recent troubles, that really classy behind the scenes. So I think you touch on that there. There's a flight. We want something to get over, and then that's dealt with. And so I'm just wondering as well, it's really interesting to me, when a club's making that approach and somebody comes to watch you, so for example, Walter Smith comes to watch you, do you get a chance to speak with them there and then after that game, or is there you cycle through your own dressing room type of thing, and then maybe the agent catches up with you. I mean, I'm just wondering, actually, just for my own interest and the listeners, what that looks like.
Yep. Yeah, no, that was, I think with that one there, I think Walter just flew in the morning of the game, then flew out straight after the game. So for us, it was an away game. So I didn't see my agent. I didn't see anyone in the stand. So for me, it was just to go out there and do the job. But you do have those situations where possible, agents and clubs will speak to a player straight after a game. That can happen. But in this case, it never was in that way.
So I'm bound to ask here, who else were you speaking to in England?
Well, I don't know how true it was. My agent said that well, he spoke to Ajax Amsterdam, and also then Man United at that stage. So there was, and again, they were, I don't know how far in discussions, and that was the one thing that I left with my agent. I said, call me when you've got some news. So, and I said at that stage, it was, I've spoken to them. They know your details, so we'll leave it from that. So,
always good to hear us beating any other club to the punch for a big signature. And it's testament obviously to the performances that you were putting in Holland, that not only Ajax but Man United and Rangers, and thankfully we land you. I'm interested. Then you come across to sign the contract, and that gets signed. You're ready to join the club.
Yep.
What's your impressions of Walter Smith in those moments? Because we always hear from players when they're mentioning in the news or whatever, they're getting ready to sign for a club, or I spoke to the manager, and you'll get this as well in your current roles and the managerial roles you cycle through as well in coaching. I spoke to the manager, he shares my vision of a player, etc. I'm interested in what those conversations look like.
Oh, well, there wasn't really any before until I signed. That was when I met Walter, and there's just I don't know how you can describe it. It's just an aura about him. At times he doesn't say much, but what he does say, you actually listen. So that was the one thing that you kind of respected him in many ways in what he did and what he achieved. But when he needed to say something, you definitely heard it. And
you ever on the end of it?
I don't think I was. No.
Lucky man.
I can't remember.
Yeah, leave it to somebody else to get it and sit on and watch it. I hear from speaking to other people as well that Walter wasn't, when it needed to be done, he wasn't short on being able to tell players exactly what was expected of them in the dressing room.
Yep.
So you come across, you sign, you come into the dressing room. I'm interested then, this is in respect of what you were saying there about other teams looking at you, I would have thought, when I remember you signing, relatively unheralded, so to speak, in terms of Scottish understanding. Although maybe some of that speaks to our insular view of football sometimes in this country. You come across relatively unheralded, coming into that team. You walk into the dressing room, and there's some really big names in there already. You've got your Gascoignes, your Laudrups, your Albertses. I think Goff comes back in a little bit later as well. There's an established network of relationships there. So Walter introduces you. I'm wondering, who's the first player that maybe takes you under the wing, or is it easy to identify who the key leaders are in the dressing room when you walk in the door?
Yeah, it's as you said, you walked in, even walking in the front door of the building, that's already intimidating. You walk in there, the staircase, and you just think, you're overpowered. You feel helpless. It's kind of like masses of water or earthquake. It's just nature. It's bigger than you are. So that was a hard one to really take on. But then walking into the change room, as you said, there was already players who've been there for a number of years, established big name players. And again, then that becomes even more intimidating because every day on the training field, you've got to perform. If you wanted to break into the team, you had to perform, and it wasn't easy because you started at the bottom, so you had to work and work and work your way up. And probably the player who helped me at the start there was Craig Moore. He was there. He was a young player, up and coming player, had been playing in the first team, so he kind of helped me and guided me in that early stage, which is always nice to come across a fellow countryman who knows how it works. And for Maury, he was more Scottish than Aussie, so he was a very good person to have helping you work your way through how the club works.
Any hazing rituals that you can tell us?
No, well, I can remember when I got there. I think the first thing Maury said, well, you need to get yourself to Armani or Versace and go buy you some suits because you need to be wearing suits when you come into training. So I was like, okay. So you come to work, you come to training with wearing a shirt and tie, and that was every day, and you totally respected it. You're going to work, so other people are going to work as well who have to wear a shirt and tie. So it's the same thing. And
standards, Tony. I hope you've still got a pair of brown brogues somewhere in the wardrobe.
Well, I'm more of it now. I'm so much more of a jeans and a t-shirt or a jumper. So I need to look for where everything is these days.
Get your club tie on for the next time we speak to you. It's probably a really good moment then to ask, and we'll touch on some of this later as well, but you spoke about Craig Moore there, and we've got Kevin Muscat in the future as well. Yep. Best Australian ever to play for Rangers? I thought you might be really quick with that answer there.
No. Look, I think Craig Maury had a fantastic career. He had, he probably found it difficult as well as a young kid coming through. Tough school to break into, and he done it, and then disappeared for a little bit, and then came back, and then probably excelled later on, and was definitely a club legend.
I'll go for Tony Vidmar. There we go. There we are. Strangely enough, one of my colleagues is actually due to sit down and have a conversation with Craig Moore in the coming days, actually. So that's an interesting conversation as well. So on that, I'll make sure that I pass your comments about Craig Moore to him. I might change them and say that you absolutely said that you were miles ahead and Craig Moore wasn't one of the I couldn't even nail down.
He'll probably agree with that. Well, with Maury, I can remember, and I still speak to Maury. We're really close. We're constantly in contact. I'll probably have to call him this week anyway. But I can remember him. I think we had a pre-season game in Norway, and I think it was probably the third or the fourth game. It was one of our last games, and Maury started, and I was on the bench, and I was probably happy because I think we were knackered by then. And after about 15 minutes, he was having a stinker, and Dickie says, "All right, Tony, you're coming on." And I went, "Oh shit! I didn't want to come on." It was like 15 minutes of like, just let this game finish. So Maury's coming off after 15 minutes. And as he's coming off, he's having a giggle. He's having a giggle, and he goes, "Sorry, son, but I owe you one." And I said, "You bastard."
One of those ones where he's tweaked my last thing. I'm going to have the shivers.
Yeah, I was like, "You bastard."
Well, that's an interesting one that I'm just wondering as well. Then your first season, I think it's probably fair to say a difficult step in terms of didn't really nail down the position. It certainly looked from the outside that it was difficult. I'm wondering how much of that was some of the expectation you speak about, new country, new club, getting into a team that was already so well established in terms of their positions, but also the kind of nuance and differences of the actual game in Scotland versus Holland, which was, I think it's probably still fair to say, technically superior, but a hell of a lot slower.
Yep. Yeah, you're spot on. Perfect. Yep. Exactly. That was the one thing, as you said, trying to break into the team when you get an opportunity and you played so, then, it made it difficult for you to be in the starting with. But again, the physicality of the Scottish football compared to Holland was, chalk and cheese. And that's probably where I struggled in that, more so that I felt that I had enough time on the ball, I could take my time, and that didn't happen. By the time you got the ball, you've already got someone on you and they're ready to tackle you and, from behind you, from the side. So that was definitely something that I really struggled with. And again, in training, you're working and doing all that. But when it came to the game, it was just that hard to switch over from Dutch football to Scottish football. And definitely was, I think that probably was the big contributor for me not cementing my place in the team.
Yeah, and certainly in Scotland as well, where the referees seem to, you can come through the back of a player and you just get to be talking to, that's your first one, and you don't get a card till later on. I'm wondering for you then, you were still, making appearances for the Australian national team with the Confederations, Cup, for example. I maybe won't speak to you in too much depth about that final. We'll gloss over it and blame it on Mark Viduka for getting sent off.
Yep.
Anyway.
Yeah.
What was he thinking? So I'm just wondering, you've got that still on the plate, and players are always worried about representing their country.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a moment in that season where you think, do you know what, I could maybe reopen some of those conversations back in Holland or down south, or was it a case of, I'm not going anywhere until I get that jersey?
Yeah, it's definitely I want to stay and prove to myself, that I could be at a club the size of Rangers and be a regular player and put in a performance that the club and supporters appreciate. And as you said, I came into the club as really as an unknown, so you've actually got to really prove yourself from day dot. And again, that was difficult. So no, I had no intentions of leaving. I thought this was the place for me to be, and I just needed to adapt quicker. And that first season, as I said, was a learning experience. And some players can take 6 months, 3 months, 12 months, and I probably took the wrong end of that 12 months.
But it's an interesting one, I think when you first start watching football or looking at it, it's hard for non-players, like people like myself, obviously. I don't think five-a-sides down the local park. But I can send you my clips highlights video if you want, Tony. I can probably dig out an Australian grandmother at some point as well if there's a cap going. But it's hard to get your head around the fact that, or away from the fact that it's the same game. How can it not just be you go from one country and you go to another and then instantly slot in? There's a whole range of issues that affect that, and people sometimes forget that professional athletes and players are humans. So we touched on some of the moving country, moving family stuff that affects you on a day-to-day basis. I'm also wondering as well, as a Rangers fan, that's a seminal season, going for 10 in a row and stuff like that. I'm wondering from inside the dressing room, you've got a really tight-knit unit who have been through everything, and then all of a sudden Potter Smith says, I'm going. My personal opinion here is that was the wrong move to publicise that at that point in time. It should have been held off to the end of the season, because I think it does have an impact. But there's also, and it mirrors right now under Steven Gerrard, or certainly this season, playing really well up till Christmas, come back, and the performances seem to really drop off after Christmas. Is that fair in your mind?
Yeah. Look, I think that, as you said, that's when Walter made that decision. I think that, not to say that he stopped coaching. No, he continued on to do that, but I think that probably affected a lot of the players who've been playing a long time there, and he just said the 10 in a row. So I think that had probably a bigger impact on those boys, because then it became, okay, well, who's the new coach coming in? What's going to happen to me next season? It becomes that unknown, and probably the focus moves away what we should be doing to things out of our own control. There's nothing we can't really control that, but yeah, look, that was something that happened, which was unfortunate. But yeah, definitely, I think it definitely played a part in the way the season finished.
Yeah, always be a what if.
Yeah.
Moment. But that happens. We get to the summer. The Cadvaca sweeps into power. I'm wondering how aware of him were you from his PSV days? Obviously, you'd come out of Nafreda. Is it somebody that you had just played against, or is it somebody you knew more about and played against? These teams?
It was more playing against these teams, and he had a lot of good players in his team that played a lot of good attacking football. So my thoughts was, well, he wants to play an attacking brand of football, well, he came in with a lot of players that moved on, and then he brought in a lot of players. So there was a big turnover of players. So you knew that he meant business. And as you said, it was probably an exciting time as well, because what he achieved at PSV, and do you think that, well, that's possible what he could do at Rangers?
For you personally, he comes in, and spoke to Ronald de Boer recently as well for This Is Ibrox, and he was talking about the influx of Dutch players, and that obviously comes slightly later. But he brings in Giovanni van Bronckhorst, who can play left back, a natural midfielder, but he can play left back. I think he ended up playing left back for Barcelona as well, and Arthur Newman. You're sitting there, and you're looking at these guys coming in, and the nationality, and these are his big purchases, lots of money going out the door.
Yep.
Where's your head? Are you on the phone to the agent? Is the agent on the phone to you to say, well, okay, or do you have how quickly does he have a conversation with you to allay any fears? Does he allay any fears?
Yeah, well, that's in the pre-season, my agent spoke to him, because, as you said, Arthur Newman came in, Giovanni van Bronckhorst can play left back. He had Stoli Stenzas as well, another left back. So there's four of us, and I spoke to my agent. I said, well, find out what's happening. So my agent spoke to him, and he said, no, you're staying. You're not going anywhere. So for me, that was okay. Then there's some serious business to be done here. So it was, as I said, there was international players coming in, and you thought, okay, well, last year was challenging. This year's going to be even more challenging, trying to break into the team, and knowing how the Dutch operate. I thought, well, I'll maybe have a little advantage of that, so I'll try to make use of it. And I reckon it was probably 2-3 weeks into pre-season training, he called me into his office and said that because he needs to offload some players, so he said that I'm free to leave. So he said, if a club comes in, you can leave. And I said to him, well, I thought actually everything was going well. And he goes, yep, I agree. Things are going well, but I've got Stoli, I've got Arthur, I've got Giovanni. So there's too many players in your position. So if you can find the club, it'll be probably in your best interest. So from that, I moved and trained with the reserve team with Bomber Brown. And I reckon it was for
train with the first team.
No, he wanted me to move away. So maybe he thought that I would be a distraction or whatever. That was his decision.
How do you that if you're being told, listen, You've worked with these guys for 12 months.
Yeah.
Go and train with the young lads. That's a really tough moment for a player.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, yeah. And then you know that your time is up. So it's disappointing with that. But then also you're training with the younger players, and then you still actually got to show these younger players that you're a professional. And that was a good thing. There was some good kids coming through there, so you didn't want to disappoint them. So Brownie was great. So I trained for a few weeks, and then I reckon it was I think it was Bomber called me up and said, "Oh, you've got to go and train with the first team." And I said, "How does that work?" I've been training here for a few weeks. He goes, "No, someone's got injured, so you've got to head down there." And I thought, well, I'll probably just go down there and fill in a number and then come back in a few weeks, whatever happens. But that wasn't the case. Arthur Newman got injured. I think he didn't want to put Giovanni as a left back, and I think Stolly was injured as well at that stage. So came and trained with the team and played. I think it was St Johnson at home, and the rest is kind of history from that, because played well in that game. Played again, I think, the week after, and then the funny thing was, I said to my agent, I said, "We're still looking." He goes, "You're still looking for a move?" I said, "Well," he said, "Well, go and knock on his door and ask him if the transfer is still on, to have it in writing." So I went and knocked on the door, on Dick's door, and he's like, "What do you want?" And I said, "I'm transfer. You told me I'm transfer free. I can find a new club. Can you put that in writing?" He goes, No. You're not going anywhere now."
Yeah, what were you talking about? I never said that.
Yeah, exactly. So it's and that's football.
Yeah, did you have a club lined up in the background?
No, not at all. And
it works out. You get back into the squad. Obviously, never nice to get back in when someone's injured, but
no.
At the end of the day, once you're in, you need to work hard to make sure that you don't go back out.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's interesting to me that there seemed to be a differential, and I'm not downplaying Walter Smith's team in any way, shape, or form. They were consistent winners, and they were based on some really talented players. But I think the general feeling with Rangers fans is that Advocaat brought probably the best brand of football that the club has ever seen. Certainly for me, in the modern era, I think it's the best level of football that we've played, with some great players. Behind the scenes, was that a feeling that was known within the club, or was it? It must have been an exciting time with the outlay of the money, this new manager. Yep. But I'm interested as well in terms of Advocaat's style. So I can imagine he would have been a lot more directive than maybe Walter Smith, who was a bit more arm around the shoulder and man management style. Is that fair, or do you find it different?
Yeah, Dick was. Oh yeah, he would be direct, and he would be screaming and telling you got to do this, you got to do that. He was that directive in that way. But I think as you got to know him, the longer period, you kind of saw a softer side of him, one-on-one man management, and again, and I liked him because he told you as it is. He wasn't, pulling any walls over your eyes or anything like that. He didn't bullshit you. But on the training field, Jesus, you couldn't put a pass wrong. And probably in that regard, with Walter, he was probably a little bit less demanding in that regard. He wasn't as strict. But again, that's how the Dutch are in that. So the trainings were quite fierce and ferocious in both instances, and it was healthy.
It must have been some season to be part of, because he sweeps into power. Next thing you know, you've got your hands on a treble, which is absolutely sensational. Get us to that 3-0 game against Celtic at Parkhead. What was your feelings leading up to that game? I'm just really interested that there's such media focus in Scotland on Old Firm games anyway, but this was a chance to win the title in Celtic's backyard. What was going through the players' minds? What was the message from Advocat? So that first season plays out, incredible treble. You get your hands on all the domestic silverware. The highlight probably being, certainly as a Rangers fan, Old Firm games have got a massive build-up anyway, but a chance to win the title in Celtic's backyard.
Yeah.
You go out, a storming game. I think probably tip my cap to Neil McCann that day as well. But I'm just interested. The build-up to, like I said, the build-up to an Old Firm game's massive anyway. But with that pressure, what was going on behind the scenes at Rangers? Was it a case of stay calm, just go out and let the football do the talking?
Yeah, exactly. It was what I can remember was, normal build-up. What is a normal build-up in an Old Firm game? But the pressure was more on them because they didn't want to be the team who lost to their biggest rivals and handed them the championship. So, but again, leading into that whole season, we as you said, we played some fantastic football. And we just had that belief that as soon as we stepped over the line that we were going to win. And that was the belief and the trust with the coaching staff and the players that we just felt that we'd win every game. And that day was an exceptional day. As I said, we stayed in control, and that was the main thing, not to get distracted, not to get carried away. Control your emotions, because if you lose control of that, then you might as well win the game, and that's what happened. Quite a few of their players lost the plot, and the occasion got ahead of them than the game itself, and we made sure we focused on the game.
It certainly seemed that way, that the Celtic players got caught up in the expectation and the pressure from their fans, whereas you guys just went out. I think Neil McCann has referred to it before as fire in the belly, ice in the veins, which is a great quote, which, if this wasn't a public podcast, I would have tried to have stolen and passed on to I'll give Neil his due there. In terms of going out, win the match, just do the job. Next thing you know, you're 2-0 up. It's half time. Celtic fans are going crazy. Vida Wiesef should probably have got a red card for that Stonewall penalty on a certain Tony Vidmar as well. But I'm really interested. You've played Old Firm games. You've went through some big games, obviously in Holland as well. But you've got fans trying to get on the pitch. You've got Hugh Dallas getting struck by a coin. I imagine you've never seen anything like that. From a player's perspective, though, I know you're conditioned to concentrate on the game, don't take any view of what's happening. Surely that's impossible with a game like that, though.
Yeah. Who said football is boring? It, as you said, there were those elements that you actually were afraid of, because, as you said, there were some supporters who ran on the field, and you didn't know which direction they were going to come from. So, as you said, there was a little bit in the back of your mind that something could go astray in that way, where more supporters come on, or at the end of the game they were throwing a whole lot of coins at us when we were coming off the field. So it was definitely a scary moment throughout the game. But as you said, at 2-0 at half time, I think we were in control of the game, and we were probably the ones who would have lost the game if on our own, not from Celtic outplaying us.
Yeah, I think one of the most controlled performances I've seen, especially in that kind of hotbed. I should give a shout out to Hugh Dallas as well. we can all criticise referees sometimes, but the pressure on him and the bravery to give that penalty after having just been struck with a coin and the baying mob from the fans is exceptional. So I think it's was he? It's really interesting actually. What was his demeanour and performance like for the rest of the game? Having been struck, looked after, was there a noticeable difference to him from the players, or
not really? No. Yeah. As you mentioned, you kind of don't really talk about referees if they had, he did what he had to do, and considering being hit by a coin in that kind of regard, because that's the last thing you think of, that a referee would be hit. So for him to continue on says a lot about the person, and it looked like it didn't affect him in finishing off the game.
So it's also so the game finishes, you get that really iconic moment, and because the camera switches to you at the end of the game, you drop to your knees, you get the ball there, and then there's a huddle. I'm just wondering from you. So it's great, obviously as a Rangers fan, I love to see Rangers players doing the huddle at Parkhead, having just 3-0 and won the title. I mean, that story's never going to get bad for me. I'm just interested in Tony Vidmar, though. You're standing there, you're seeing the corner and the support, because that's where they always put us.
Yeah.
This is, 10 months, roughly? You've got, a treble coming up, 10 months after essentially being told, listen, get out, go and train with the reserves. What about that personal journey? Did that come back to you in that moment? Is there a wee bit of vindication for you?
No, I don't think so. It's for me, it was part and parcel of football. That's how it was. You get dealt a bad hand, and you just dust yourself and continue on and go on. And I think I probably go back to the few years back in Belgium where it wasn't going well. So it was kind of like, okay, I know how football is. Things can change, and that was, going back that 10 months. It was, things will change. Something will happen. A decision is made in the morning, and then it maybe changes in the afternoon. So that kind of was in the back of my mind. But no, it was just, yeah. The season was unbelievable. As you said, 10 months earlier, I probably wouldn't have expected to, let alone play one game, but to be involved in winning 3 titles was something special.
Do you remember anything of the party that night, or is it all just a bluff?
Oh God, it's all a blur. I think there was a few of those that are just a blur. Yeah, no, it was. Look, to win 3-0 at your rivals and to be champions is that's special. That is, winning the title was fantastic, but to do it in their backyard was great. It was a great feeling, and yeah, that is something that you never forget. Well, and I'm sure the supporters who were there in the stadium or outside watching will still be talking about that as well.
Yeah, I think we've never forgotten it, and they've never recovered from it. Would be my take on that one. So happy with the memory. So I'll fast forward then, and I'll take us to what I think is probably your high watermark in terms of when somebody mentions Tony Vidmar and Rangers, instantly springs to mind Parma. I think that's always going to be the case. I mean, lots of trophies in the back pocket, obviously, but it's just one of those games that sits up. And for me, the best atmosphere I've ever encountered at Ibrox, it was a wall of noise that night. And for some of our younger listeners who maybe didn't realise what that Parma team looked like, I mean, you've got guys like Cannavaro, Buffon, Ortega, De Vaio, and I would personally say as well the massively underrated Alan Bogosian was in that team as well. But it probably links back to what you were saying earlier. Rangers were playing a brand of football that was fantastic, but also had that feeling of invincibility you were touching on there. Of we can go out and we can actually beat anybody, not only in the physical aspects, but we are so talented we can play round about them as well.
Yeah.
Inside the camp, were Parma a different prospect, or was this a case of, no, we're going to show everybody in Europe as well?
Well, the one thing we were aware of is that they were in their pre-season. So we were, I don't know, 3 or 4 games into our competition. So we kind of had that match fitness or match harden that they didn't have. So for us was, all right, let's just throw the kitchen sink at them, see if they can cope with it or deal with it, because we knew that they wouldn't be able to last, the full game. So it was throw everything at them, but also that belief and that we can go on the field and match it with anyone. And that night there was the European nights were special, but that definitely was, as an atmosphere, was unbelievable. And that's why you wanted to play for a club like Rangers, because of those nights.
And it's, crashing one into the back of the net. You cut inside, you hit it. I'm not entirely sure it takes a deflection anymore. It rockets right in.
You can't lie on that. It did take a deflection. Yeah, but it still went in.
It beats a hat trick in a pre-season friendly against Livingston. So I think we can call this your high water mark. That's
right. The Livingston hat trick was not bad.
I've done my research.
You have done it. That's great.
I was going to actually just not speak about Parma at all, but I figured people might be more interested in the Parma game than the.
I think it was 3 and 15 minutes or something like that. It was pretty quick fire.
I'm not entirely sure that's spot on here. I'm going to go back and check my records after this. Look at
now back to Parma.
Yeah, it hits the back of the net against. Definitely talking about Parma here, right?
Yep.
It hits the back of the net. I've heard some comments as well from people like Buffon that say that they weren't expecting it. They also weren't expecting the noise, the atmosphere. They also weren't expecting a Scottish team to play as well as we did. Did you guys get that feeling, or were there any comments from their players after the game that they'd encountered that? Because they did look a little bit shell-shocked during that, and it's always apparent when you watch it back.
Yeah. Look, I agree that they weren't expecting for us to play that brand of football. They were probably expecting, a bit more direct, physical, and that was probably their preparation, because and just going ahead to the second leg, it was a totally different team. They were an extra couple of weeks or an extra week of training and playing a game, and there was a different proposition. They were probably shocked completely from the first leg, and they needed to do something in that second leg. But again, they weren't expecting that from us. And again, the whole atmosphere and the whole thing about that night was something that you won't forget.
Yeah, I mean, a top side that Parma team, it has to be said. So, 2 good legs that will live long in the memory, and putting a team like that out of the way is no mean feat, particularly with what some of their players went on to achieve anyway.
Yeah.
So we hit the fast forward button again, and we get into that difficult third album, so to speak, when it comes to Advocat. And I suppose for me, this is probably the first time that I understood or started to get an understanding of that, managers working cycles.
Mm-hmm.
Things. It's really the real difficulty of management, and you maybe find this now you're in more on the coaching side, etc. That it's difficult to build a team, maintain a team, rebuild it whilst you're also still winning things. And Rangers being you're there, that you don't get a second chance. You need to constantly be winning things whilst also circulating. What was the feeling inside the camp? There's been lots of talk from other players, people behind the scenes, that it became a bit more cliquey. The Dutch players were more relied on. Ronald de Boer himself had said to me that Advocat maybe started to take more on board or take to heart what was being said in the press about it and the team. Were you guys feeling that as well?
Yeah, it was definitely a different atmosphere in the change room. I think there was a lot of probably the one thing I looked at it was there was a lot of players who came in, and on top of that success that we had the last few years, and not saying that the players who were successful in those couple of years were coming to the end of their careers or not playing well. It kind of, it became messy, and I'm still trying to work out, because someone else has asked me that question a while ago about it, and I'm just thinking that new players came in, and I think a lot of people didn't know where they stood, and I think in those last 2 seasons everyone knew where they stood, so it became that, well, what's going on? And I think that became the distraction, and probably the press were starting to get on the back of Advocaat, and I think he took that probably personally, and so that probably triggered that as well, because that season wasn't great, and they're probably the 2 things, as I said, that players came in, they didn't know what was happening. The players who were there didn't know what was happening, so it was that unknown. No one knew what was happening. Team changed, and there was no cohesion as it was in the previous 2 years.
Yeah, it certainly seemed from the outside, from a fan's perspective, that it was a bit rudderless, but that there has also been not a drop in quality in terms of some of the players coming in, not being dismissive of them, but some strange decisions of people coming in, maybe people's nationalities having something to do with that as well.
Yeah.
But also that maybe not a drop in quality, maybe a drop in the consistency of ability to deliver.
Yeah.
That seemed to just knock the team right off course, and then established players being moved aside for people coming in for a couple of games.
Yeah.
It seems as though that was affecting you guys.
Yeah, it definitely was. It definitely was. It wasn't the same belief. There wasn't the same, we walk on the field, we're going to win. There was that doubt. As soon as you have a doubt you walk on the field, then that's the kind of performance that you're going to put in. You may put a great performance in, but then you may have 3 weeks of terrible performances. So as players, and that was the one thing that, as I said in the beginning, that what I liked about Dick was he was direct, he was straight to the point. And I felt that probably in that season it was a little bit sideways a little bit. He wasn't sure what team he wanted to put out there, and I think that affected the season.
Yeah, I think there was obviously lots going on there, and then he moves upstairs into the upstairs director's role, so to speak, probably the best way to put it there. And in comes Alex McLeish, who had been in Hibs, so would have been aware of him, maybe not on a one-to-one personal level. Totally different style from Dick Advocaat. More of a, from what I'm led to believe, more of a man management, arm around the shoulder, maybe more akin to Walter Smith than Advocaat. What was his impact on the dressing room straight away? Because we end up obviously with that cup double.
Yep. Look, he definitely brought something different. As you said, the management side, I think, as well, and I think that's probably what the players craved for. I think, and having 3 years with Dick, it got to a point where things changed, and he was probably the change that the players needed, and they were ones who worked for him. He gave them the belief, he gave them, the confidence, put the team, which he felt was each week, which was going to win the game, and the players went out and done that. So I think that definitely changed in a way that the players appreciated.
Yeah, and like I say, we end up with that cup double, including the famous last-minute winner from Peter Lovenkrands. I know you were on the bench that day, but I'm sure you managed to access the beers on the way back. You pull on a strip, you're allowed access to the gold ones.
Yeah.
But that's a real high. So you've cycled through a hell of a lot in your Rangers career. You've been told to go. You've been training with the reserves. You've fought your way back in. You've proved your worth. You've won the treble. You've got another cup double in your back pocket as well. I think it's fair to say McLeish was brought in for a host of reasons. One of them being that the financial aspect of the club was starting to become more apparent. It'd be interesting to know how much of that was known to the players and if that was affecting anyone, if you're keeping one eye on it, because ultimately it's your job as well, and you need to be paid. But then you're told that you can go. Was that a surprise to you, or was there an expectation that you were going to be staying on and signing a new contract, and then maybe it changed because of the money aspect? And that's not to say you asking for any, outlandish things. I'm just saying the club not being able to match up to what a player of your caliber would expect.
Yeah, well, before Dick went upstairs, when he was still coaching, we sat down, and because I think the months before that, there was talk that I was leaving. I was going to another club, and then Dick came to me and spoke to me and said, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I'd like to stay. I want to stay. He goes, you don't want to leave? I said, no. I said, I don't even know where that's come from, but I'm happy here. Don't want to move on. So he said, all right, that's good to know. We'll make a deal and we'll get that sorted. So he goes, just leave it with me. So that was before he went upstairs. And then when he went upstairs, that was months. We were still waiting to find out what was happening. And there was probably a little bit of an inkling about financially what was happening at the club. So whether that had an impact. So it was, I think, even to the week of the cup final when Alex called me into the office and said that he said to me, the goalposts have changed. We can't offer you a contract. So, and that was it. So never got to a point where discussing what the contract would be or anything like that. And that was disappointing because speaking to Dick months before, we agreed that I would stay on. So at that stage, didn't look to find a new club or anything like that. So that came out of the blue, which is disappointing. But again, I think that was probably financially. I'm not sure. I could be wrong in that regard.
Yeah, not to put words in your mouth. In my own opinion, would be that sounds like not the best way to have handled the conversation. If you've been given one view of something, you're left, and then, like you say, you have time for your agent to go out and go to the market or have another conversation and see what is achievable at the club. Next thing you know, listen, thanks for the memories. Off you go. So disappointing. I think it's probably disappointing for you personally. Certainly disappointing from a fan's perspective to lose a player like you. And then you go, you get Middlesbrough, you get Cardiff, laudable clubs. I think it's probably fair to say, with all due respect to them, not of the same size or expectation of Rangers. And then back to Breda and then back to Australia. In my research, I was really interested, and this is more of a personal pointed question as we come towards the end of this interview. You have a heart scare, and I'm wondering what goes through a player's mind or any athlete's mind. This is people have heart scares or have health issues all the time, but it's slightly different with a player because you're told that this could absolutely end what you've done all your life, i.e., you can't play anymore. And I'm wondering how that affects you. Did you reach out to other people in the game, or how did you work through
that? I reckon probably for a few months I was probably in denial. Didn't believe it was true, which is probably not the best thing to do. I think it was a complete shock because you think you've been an athlete all your life, and all of a sudden this is going to stop you. So you didn't believe it. You thought it was still made up. And I can remember being in the car when after being in the hospital. I had to speak to the physio from the national team, and I said to him, I said, "No, it's no good. They told me I've got to stop playing." And he goes, "Piss off! Stop messing about." And I said, "No, it's true. It's true." So yeah, it was totally out of the blue. So you don't know how. You're just in shock because you think it's not happening. But then you go and see two different other cardiologists, specialists, and they tell you the same thing. So they kind of think, well, okay, that kind of like puts your mind a little bit at ease. But yeah, it was definitely a huge disappointment leading into a World Cup. It would have been a fantastic way to finish off a career, but was never meant to be. And fortunately, they found it, because if I continued on, then it could have been serious trouble. So you look on that way, that your health is important, and that's the thing. You think you're fit and healthy, but things like that can happen.
Yeah, as you say, it would have been nice to have went out on your own terms
Mm-hmm.
at a World Cup,
Yep.
as opposed to having it slightly taken away. But health and fitness first. It seems, I imagine, all good now, fit and healthy.
Yeah, fit and healthy. Yeah. Get tested every year. So I've been even in this lockdown, I've been training with my kids. So for the last 6 weeks, I've shed a few kilos and feel a lot fitter. So this has been a good thing.
those kilos have worked their way around the world and have landed on me, to be honest with you. Different lockdown performance when it comes to the fitness. So, final question then. Looking in from the outside, Rangers at the moment, we've maybe a bit like that first season under Walter Smith. We had a really good first half of the season, and then tailed right off after Christmas. Is that something? I appreciate you're not inside that dressing room, but is that something that a team just has to win something to get out of the way? Once you get something in the back pocket, is that when a team really cements itself? Because certainly that's the feeling amongst the support, that this Rangers team under Gerrard just needs to get a trophy in.
Yeah, that's a good point. It actually is a good point, because, as you said, I've watched some games this season, and that first half of the season was very good, and now it came to a point where it just kind of fizzled, unfortunately. And that's because you felt the first season under him, he was going to find his feet and work with the group of players he had, and then second year he could bring in some players, and then you kind of felt that this is the opportunity. But you've got to go through the whole season, and I think we had that in that first year with Advocaat, that I think we got to February, and we kind of fumbled a little bit, but got the trophy then. So you've probably got to ride through those tough periods and probably play ugly, win ugly, and then that builds a mark of a good team. And maybe it's something like that they need that a little bit of luck on the way as well. But look, you hope that a championship is not far away, because as you said, they started off really well, and who knows, it could be, you knew once he came there, it was always going to take him a few years to get to competing at to be one or two through the competition.
Yeah, and obviously Scottish football at the moment going through the farcical infighting with votes to end the league and emails disappearing, and yeah, it's an interesting time in Scottish football. So, being not a man of my word, obviously, final question, which I did say a moment ago, and it's I did really want to speak about your role at the Socceroos, the Australian national team, as well, in terms of assistant manager. Yep. We had a conversation with, let's say, Ronald de Boer, and we'd spoken to the Rangers as well, in terms of some of the work that's been done behind the scenes to keep players updated with webinars and clips. Are you guys doing that from the national side as well, or is it slightly different when it's not a club day-to-day relationship you have?
Yeah, it's a little bit different in that way. We with the national team, we meet together every couple of weeks, because again, international football is probably on the back burner of FIFA's minds at the moment. I think club football is probably the number one at this stage. So in that regard, it's on the back burner. I do some work with the 20s as well, 20s national team. I help them out. So we've kind of meeting every week and discussing and doing some kind of form of video analysis on games that we've done with those teams and those players. So yeah, you try to come a little bit creative, trying to keep them busy. But it's also difficult because you only get them when it's international duty, so they're with their club, so their focus is with their club. So it's a little bit weird the way that that is happening at the moment in football, but hopefully that slowly changes.
In closing, then, any message for the Rangers fans listening?
Well, I'd like to wish them all the best, and they're all safe there. And then once the football gets up and running again, that they're out supporting as they were back in the 90s and early 2000 when I was playing there. Best bunch of supporters, and hopefully that success is not far away.
Here to that. Listen, Tony, this has been a fantastic conversation. I've really enjoyed it, and my thanks again for making the time to speak to us. I will make sure that all the toilet paper that you asked for in your full format email gets sent to you immediately.
Yeah, it's 3-ply. It's got to be 3-ply toilet paper.
Listen, we only do spoken like a real treble winner there. It has to be 3 or it's nothing at all. Listen, it's been absolutely brilliant, and like I said, I'd just like to thank you for your time. It's been a real pleasure to speak to you. I've been Thomas McIntyre. This is Ibrox Interviews, and you've been. Do you know,
who am I?
Nobody ever says it when I do that at the end. When I know you're going to say their name. So I'm going to do it.
I was going to say.
I'm going to do this again for the sake of continuity, right? But I'm not going to edit it. I've been Thomas McIntyre. This is Ibrox Interviews, and you've been
Craig Moore.
Did you ever play for Rangers?
No.
How did you get into this Zoom?
Yeah, crazy. No. And I'm Tony Vidmar. Thank you.